Hey there, welcome back. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the world of Bitcoin.
Ooh, Bitcoin.
We'll be exploring an excerpt from the book Bitcoin, The Revolution That Might Burn It All Down.
Wow.
It's a pretty provocative title, right? But it gets at the heart of what we're exploring, this digital currency that has the potential to revolutionize finance, but also comes with some serious risks.
Definitely.
So imagine this. You put your savings into Bitcoin, hoping to ride the wave to financial freedom, but then the whole thing crashes and burns. What happens then?
It's interesting, isn't it, this idea of a financial system built on something intangible, existing solely in the digital realm. It's a far cry from the traditional systems we're used to. But to understand where Bitcoin might be going, it helps to look back at where it came from.
Okay, so take us back to Bitcoin's origin story.
Well, picture the 2008 financial crisis. The world was in chaos. Trust in banks and governments had eroded, and people were looking for alternatives. That's when Bitcoin emerged, created by the mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto. To this day, no one knows for sure if it was one person or a group.
Satoshi Nakamoto. It sounds more like a character from a sci-fi novel than a real person.
Right. There's this almost mythical quality to the whole thing. But what's fascinating is that Bitcoin wasn't just about creating a new currency. It was about building a new system, a decentralized one, free from the control of any single entity.
So no central banks, no government regulations. It was a pretty radical concept.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it tapped into this deep-seated desire for control, for a way to escape what many saw as a rigged financial system.
Yeah.
But fast forward to 2024, and things have gotten a lot more complex. We've gone from this fringe idea to a $1 trillion market cap with major corporations and even some governments dipping their toes into the crypto waters.
It's been quite a ride. The book even compares Bitcoin's volatility to the Wild West, which seems fitting given its unpredictable swings. But is that analogy a bit overused? Is there a more nuanced way to describe what's happening with Bitcoin?
You're right. The Wild West comparison is a bit simplistic. It captures the excitement and the risk, but it doesn't fully explain the underlying dynamics. What we're seeing with Bitcoin is a classic example of speculation and market psychology. People are driven by FOMO, the fear of missing out, and that can lead to irrational exuberance, followed by equally dramatic crashes.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about human behavior, our hopes and fears all playing out in this digital arena.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that makes Bitcoin so fascinating and so unpredictable. But beyond the hype and the speculation, there are some fundamental aspects of Bitcoin that are worth understanding.
Let's talk about those. The book throws around terms like decentralization and blockchain, but honestly, I need a bit of a refresher. What exactly does it mean for a currency to be decentralized? And how does blockchain technology actually work?
Okay, let's break it down. When we talk about decentralization, we're talking about a system where there is no single point of control. In traditional finance, you have banks and governments acting as intermediaries, controlling the flow of money. With Bitcoin, that power is distributed across a network of computers.
So it's like taking the power away from the few and giving it to the many.
That's the idea. And blockchain is the technology that makes this possible. Imagine a digital ledger, a record of all Bitcoin transactions that is constantly being updated and verified by this network of computers.
Right.
Each block in the chain contains a set of transactions, and once a block is added, it cannot be altered.
Wait, so if every computer on the network has a copy of this ledger, doesn't that make it incredibly secure?
Exactly. That's one of the key advantages of blockchain. It's incredibly difficult to tamper with because you would have to hack into countless computers simultaneously.
Yeah.
And that's where the concept of mining comes in.
Okay, so miners are basically the guardians of this digital ledger.
You can think of it that way. Miners are constantly verifying and adding new blocks to the blockchain. They do this by solving complex mathematical problems, and the first one to solve the problem gets to add the next block and earn some Bitcoin as a reward.
So it's like a digital gold rush with miners competing to solve these complex puzzles.
It is. And the book mentions this fascinating tidbit. Over 4 million Bitcoins are lost forever. People forgetting their passwords, losing their hard drives. It goes to show that even in this seemingly perfect digital world, human error is still a factor.
It's like a reminder that even with all this technology, we're still fallible.
Precisely. And that brings us to the other side of the coin. This lack of central authority, while empowering in some ways, also creates opportunities for misuse.
That's where things start to get a little bit uncomfortable.
It's true. While the decentralized nature of Bitcoin was initially seen as a huge plus, it also presents challenges. Without regulations and oversight, it's become a haven for illicit activities.
That's right. The book dives into how Bitcoin has become the go-to currency for cybercriminals. Remember Silk Road? That infamous online black market where everything from drugs to weapons was bought and sold using Bitcoin.
And it's not just Silk Road ransomware attacks, where hackers hold your data hostage and demand payment in Bitcoin have become increasingly common. The anonymity that Bitcoin offers makes it incredibly difficult to trace these transactions, which is a huge problem for law enforcement.
It sounds like a digital version of those shady back alley deals, only with much higher stakes. And with governments struggling to keep up, it makes you wonder if we're heading towards a digital Wild West where anything goes.
Well, governments around the world are grappling with how to regulate this new landscape. Some, like China, have taken a hard line imposing outright bans on Bitcoin. Others, like El Salvador, have tried to embrace it, even making it legal tender. But as the book points out, that experiment hasn't been entirely successful.
It seems like governments are caught between a rock and a hard place. They can't ignore Bitcoin, but they also can't control it in the same way they control traditional currencies.
Exactly. And this raises some important questions about the future of national economies. If more and more people start using Bitcoin, could it eventually destabilize traditional financial systems?
That's a scary thought. And the book doesn't shy away from painting a rather bleak picture of what a Bitcoin crash could look like. Millions losing their savings corporations, collapsing a global economic shockwave that makes the 2008 recession seem tame.
It's a sobering thought, isn't it? And it's not just about the financial impact. The environmental consequences of Bitcoin mining are also a major concern. The book compares the energy consumption of Bitcoin mining to that of entire countries.
Yeah, reading about Iceland's geothermal power being strained and China's reliance on coal-powered plants for mining was a real eye-opener. It made me think twice about the environmental cost of those cool and futuristic Bitcoin transactions.
It's a hidden cost that many people don't consider. And then there's the issue of e-waste.
Yeah.
What happens to all those mining rigs when they become obsolete? There's a potential environmental disaster waiting to happen.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the risks and potential downsides of Bitcoin. But the book also acknowledges its revolutionary potential. What does that look like in practice? How could Bitcoin actually be a force for good?
That's a crucial point. While it's important to be aware of the risks, we shouldn't overlook the potential benefits. Imagine a world where financial transactions are truly borderless and accessible to everyone, regardless of their location or income. That's the promise of Bitcoin.
So it's about empowering individuals, especially those who have been excluded from traditional financial systems.
Exactly. Think about people in developing countries who don't have access to bank accounts or credit cards. Bitcoin can provide them with a secure and affordable way to manage their finances, send money to loved ones, and even start businesses.
It's like a whole new level of financial inclusion. But I keep coming back to this question of trust. We're so used to relying on banks and governments to manage our money. Can we really trust this decentralized system, especially given its volatility and the potential for misuse?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that each individual has to grapple with. But what's fascinating about Bitcoin is that it forces us to confront these fundamental questions about trust, power, and control. It's not just about technology. It's about rethinking our relationship with money and the institutions that govern it.
It's almost philosophical, isn't it? And it goes beyond just Bitcoin. It makes you think about the broader implications of technology on our lives and the kind of future we're creating.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations. The future of finance, and perhaps even our societies, is being shaped right now. And we need to be actively engaged in shaping it.
The book talks about Bitcoin potentially destroying the very system it seeks to replace. If that were to happen, what would be left standing in the ashes? What kind of world will we be left with?
That's the mic drop question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And honestly, there's no easy answer.
Mhm.
But I think it highlights the importance of being prepared for different scenarios.
So it's not just about whether Bitcoin will succeed or fail. It's about understanding the potential consequences and thinking critically about the kind of future we want to build.
Exactly. And that brings us back to you, the listener. If Bitcoin really does disrupt the financial system as we know it, are you ready for what might come next? And what role do you want to play in shaping that future? It's a question we should all be asking ourselves.
And it's not just about Bitcoin. It's about all these emerging technologies that are challenging the status quo and forcing us to rethink how we live, work, and interact with each other.
So it's not just about being a passive observer. It's about being an active participant in shaping this digital revolution.
Exactly. The book encourages us to take action.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about dabbling in crypto, do it cautiously and consider offsetting your carbon footprint.
That's a good point. We can't just ignore the environmental impact of these technologies. We have a responsibility to make sure they're being used in a sustainable way.
And beyond the individual level, we need to be having these conversations on a societal level. What kind of regulations do we need to put in place to ensure that these technologies are being used responsibly? How can we make sure that everyone benefits from these innovations, not just a select few?
These are big questions, and there are no easy answers. But that's what makes this whole topic so fascinating. It's not just about technology, it's about people and how we choose to use these tools to shape our future.
And that's the message I want to leave you with. The future is not something that just happens to us. It's something we create. And the choices we make today will determine the kind of world we live in tomorrow.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Bitcoin, I hope you're feeling a little bit more informed, a little bit more curious, and maybe even a little bit empowered.
Because the future of finance and maybe even the world is being written right now. And you have a voice in that story.
And that, my friends, is the bottom of our deep dive for today. We hope you enjoy the journey, and we encourage you to keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. If Bitcoin really does disrupt the financial system as we know it, are you ready for what might come next? And what role do you want to play in shaping that future? It's a question we should all be asking ourselves.
And it's not just about Bitcoin. It's about all these emerging technologies that are challenging the status quo and forcing us to rethink how we live, work, and interact with each other.
So it's not just about being a passive observer. It's about being an active participant in shaping this digital revolution.
Exactly. The book encourages us to take action. If you're thinking about dabbling in crypto, do it cautiously and consider offsetting your carbon footprint.
That's a good point. We can't just ignore the environmental impact of these technologies. We have a responsibility to make sure they're being used in a sustainable way.
And beyond the individual level, we need to be having these conversations on a societal level. What kind of regulations do we need to put in place to ensure that these technologies are being used responsibly? How can we make sure that everyone benefits from these innovations, not just a select few?
These are big questions, and there are no easy answers. But that's what makes this whole topic so fascinating. It's not just about technology, it's about people and how we choose to use these tools to shape our future.
And that's the message I want to leave you with. The future is not something that just happens to us, it's something we create. And the choices we make today will determine the kind of world we live in tomorrow.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Bitcoin, I hope you're feeling a little bit more informed, a little bit more curious, and maybe even a little bit empowered.
Because the future of finance, and maybe even the world, is being written right now. And you have a voice in that story.
And that, my friends, is the bottom of our deep dive for today. We hope you enjoyed the journey, and we encourage you to keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.